Welcome back to Process Cast with Mark Anderson and Samantha Blake, your go-to podcast for insights into business process management and the technologies transforming the way we work.
Are your performance reviews something you dread? Maybe a bureaucratic hurdle you just have to jump over? Or can they actually be a springboard for your growth and, the success of your team?
It's a question we think about a lot, definitely. Because you, like us, have probably seen how often these reviews kind of miss the mark.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really laser focused on answering a pretty fundamental question. What are the best practices for conducting truly effective performance reviews?
Yeah, and you've likely sat on both sides of that feedback table, right?
Yeah.
You know when it works, and let's be honest, probably more often when it doesn't.
That's right. We're not just talking about making reviews bearable. Our goal in this deep dive is to uncover what makes them genuinely valuable.
And to do that, we've pulled together insights from, leading thinkers, places like Bain Company, Deloitte Insights, and WorldatWork. They've each tackled this challenge, but from different angles, looking at efficiency, fairness, and just how performance management is changing.
Exactly. So our mission today is basically to cut through the noise, the jargon, and deliver some actionable strategies. We want to equip you with the knowledge to hopefully transform performance reviews from something that causes anxiety into a powerful tool for development and organizational progress.
Okay, let's dive in. Where do we start?
Let's start with a foundational piece. Setting the right targets. Bain Company identifies this as the crucial first step.
Yeah, and what's interesting there is Bain's emphasis on making sure those targets are really deeply connected to the overall direction of the company. It's not about random goals,
Right. It's about a clear line of sight to the bigger picture.
Think about that consumer products company they mentioned. During a merger, they didn't just tweak their old review process, they apparently completely reevaluated it to make sure every single target supported their ambitious 3 to 5 year strategy.
Wow. So that direct link helps individuals understand how they contribute to the bigger vision.
Precisely. It fosters a sense of purpose, drives more focused effort. You know what you're working towards.
That makes so much sense. I mean, if your individual or team goals aren't actually moving the company forward, you have to wonder, what's the point?
Exactly.
And Bain also highlights that the level of detail in these targets needs to fit the organizational structure. They contrast a holding company, which might focus on high-level financial KPIs.
Right, big picture stuff.
With a company where the central team is more hands-on, needing more specific operational targets. Have you seen that disconnect yourself?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about finding that right balance, isn't it? You need enough detail for clarity, for accountability, but not so much that it just becomes micromanagement. That stifles initiative.
Yeah. Kill creativity.
As Bain points out with that consumer products example, the aim is to spark meaningful discussion, not just, tick boxes on a list.
Good point. And this naturally leads us to the different ways you can actually set these targets.
Right. We're not just talking vague hopes here. Bain breaks down target setting into methodologies tailored to the type of work being done.
Okay, like what?
Well, for routine run-the-business activities, where you generally know what to expect, think standard operations, traditional KPIs are often the most suitable.
Right. Key performance indicators, predictable, ongoing stuff. You can set pretty precise targets there.
Exactly. You have a reasonable expectation of hitting them. But, and this is where it gets interesting, when you're dealing with change the business initiatives, things like launching a new product line or a big organizational shift.
Stuff with more uncertainty.
Yeah. For those, Bain suggests that OKR's objectives and key results, or maybe even just key project milestones, can be much more effective. What are your thoughts on that distinction?
It really rings true. Change is inherently about exploration, adaptation, right? You can't always predict the final outcome with the same certainty as your day-to-day operations.
For sure.
So the targets need to reflect that flexibility, focusing on progress, on learning along the way, just like Bain emphasizes.
And those change targets will likely evolve, too, as the initiative moves forward. The key insight here is that the focus shifts. It becomes about understanding what's working, what isn't.
And making informed decisions based on that learning. Like, do we continue, speed up, or even pivot the project?
Exactly. It's about adapting based on real-time feedback and results.
Okay, so we've got the right kind of targets. They're aligned with the big picture, using the right approach. What's the next piece of this puzzle for effective reviews?
Bain's second action focuses on implementing a lean review process.
That sounds like something everyone can get behind, honestly, especially if you've ever been buried under like mountains of pre-reading material.
You're hitting on a major pain point there. Bain highlights how the sheer volume and complexity of reviews can just escalate over time. It leads to wasted effort and, those infamous 115 pages they found at one telco.
Oof, 115 pages. Wow.
Yeah. So the core idea behind a lean review process is to just streamline things, make the reviews more focused, more efficient, and ultimately more valuable.
Right. So what are the core ingredients of this lean process then? Bain touches on several key areas: cadence, preparation, agenda, duration, who needs to be there, and even like where the reviews happen.
Let's start with cadence. They suggest quarterly reviews as a kind of standard, maybe supplemented by lighter monthly check-ins, particularly for those change the business things we were just talking about. Does that rhythm feel right to you?
It often does, yeah. The pace of change in a project or, a market can really dictate how often you need those more formal check-ins.
And monthly check-ins can give you those crucial opportunities to spot and tackle roadblocks much faster, more agilely.
Makes sense. And then there's the preparation, shifting away from those epic pre-reads
The novel.
to something much more manageable. 15 pages for a quarterly review. That sounds almost revolutionary compared to some docs I've seen.
And just one page for a monthly check-in. I mean, that's a game changer in terms of time investment alone.
Totally. Plus, the emphasis on having standardized reporting for your key metrics. That makes sure everyone is looking at the same clear data, no confusion.
Precisely. It's all about maximizing efficiency and clarity, which leads us straight to the agenda. Bain stresses this should be specifically tailored depending on whether you're reviewing run the business operations or change the business projects.
Okay, break that down.
So for run the business, the focus should be on understanding the context behind your KPI development, really digging into the root causes of any deviations from the plan.
Why are we off track?
Exactly. And then clearly defining the action plans to get back on track. What stood out to you about that part?
I think the key insight there is the emphasis Bain puts on spending over 70% of the time on the most critical, high-value topics or initiatives that are currently off course.
Yeah, focus where it matters most.
That's a powerful way to prioritize, right? Prevents the review from becoming just a superficial skim over everything.
Definitely. And for change the business forums, the agenda naturally shifts. It's more about progress updates, identifying roadblocks, figuring out what help is needed.
Clarifying focus areas for the next period, defining next steps, talking resourcing, and even making those tough decisions like, do we keep going or pull the plug on a project?
It's a much more dynamic, forward-looking agenda, really centered around learning and adaptation.
And the timeframes they suggest seem reasonable too. Half a day to a full day for quarterly reviews.
Up to an hour for unit or function monthly meetings, maybe 2 to 3 hours for major change initiatives. But as Bain points out, these will obviously vary. Depends on company size, number of initiatives.
Makes sense. And who should be in these discussions?
For those broader company-wide quarterly reviews, Bain suggests the full executive committee is often involved. Makes sense for big picture alignment.
But the monthly check-ins can be more focused, like a smaller group of key people.
Exactly. Keeps the conversations targeted. And finally, location that blend of virtual and on-site meetings.
Yeah, what's the thinking there?
Bain suggests alternating can be beneficial, especially for dispersed teams. Virtual offers flexibility, obviously, but those face-to-face interactions can sometimes foster stronger connections, more focused discussion.
So you pick up more nonverbal cues.
They also make an interesting point about maybe aligning review schedules with existing exec meetings for efficiency, but also being mindful of meeting fatigue. Don't want people zoning out.
Good point. Okay, so a lean process, thoughtful rhythm, focused prep, tailored agendas, right duration, right people, considered location. Sounds like a strong framework.
Definitely.
Now, Bain's third action shifts our attention to what actually happens during these reviews, fostering constructive dialogue. This, to me, feels like where the real impact is made or lost.
Absolutely. This is critical. Bain emphasizes that these review meetings shouldn't be about assigning blame or just dwelling on past failures.
No finger pointing.
Right. Instead, these should be structured as constructive two-way conversations. The primary goal, empowering the management team.
So leadership sets the direction, but trusts the teams to figure out the best path.
That's the idea, setting the destination, letting the teams chart the course. What are your thoughts on that shift in focus?
I think it's crucial. It moves senior execs into more of a supportive role, right? Helping clear obstacles rather than just acting as judges handing down verdicts.
It's a delicate balance, for sure, providing oversight, but truly empowering teams to take ownership.
And Bain points out this often requires a big shift in leadership behavior. It's not about running the meeting in a way that's most comfortable for the top execs,
But designing the meeting structure to actually achieve its goals.
Yeah.
Form follows function.
Exactly. So in those run the business meetings, the focus is collaborative, digging into root causes, developing solutions together.
Precisely. And in the change the business meetings, the emphasis is more on learning from progress, identifying and removing roadblocks that are slowing things down.
And fostering that culture of continuous improvement.
Okay, and the example Bain gives from that personal care company is really illuminating, I think.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
They shifted their attention from lagging indicators, things like market share, revenue, profit, stuff that tells you what already happened.
Looking backward.
They're leading indicators, things like their presence in stores, how products are positioned on shelves, the status of their latest innovations, even consumer attitudes.
So focusing on the future drivers of success.
Exactly. The goal was to spend less time analyzing the past and more time focusing on the future actions that would actually drive success, making the dialogue more forward-looking, more action-oriented.
That's a fantastic illustration. Concentrate on the factors that will influence future results, not just dissecting history.
Right.
Okay, so we've hit setting targets, lean process, constructive dialogue. Bain's fourth and final action is about drawing consequences from the progress observed. This implies these reviews aren't just talk, they should lead to tangible outcomes, adjustments.
Precisely. Whether a team or unit has smashed expectations or fallen short, the review process needs to be a catalyst for some kind of change. It can't just be a discussion that goes nowhere.
Bain shares an example of a food company.
Yeah, a leading food company that moved to standardized review processes across all its international markets. This allowed them to compare performance consistently across different countries.
And then apply lessons learned in one place to others. Have you seen that kind of cross-pollination work well?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that standardization led to some really concrete outcomes for them, right? Clear agreements on next steps, adjustments to resource allocations, setting up interim check-ins if needed.
Plus, it sparked ideas with broader applicability, like that new flavor example.
Exactly. The successful new flavor from France got rolled out to Spain because the standardized review process made that success visible and transferable.
It's about building a truly learning organization then, where successes and setbacks lead to improvement across the board.
Absolutely. And Bain poses some really critical questions for organizations to consider based on these review outcomes.
Such as?
Like, should we be stopping or adjusting strategic initiatives, projects, maybe even our org structure? Do we need to reallocate budgets or teams based on performance?
Tough questions.
And perhaps the biggest one, should we be tying progress to individual compensation to really incentivize the desired behaviors and results?
The compensation link.
Yeah.
Always tricky. But these are the essential questions that show these reviews need to have real teeth, real impact. They're decision-making forums, not just status updates.
Couldn't agree more. They should actively drive action and results.
Okay, now let's shift gears a bit. We know that even with the best processes, the human element, well, it can introduce unintended biases, right? That can undermine fairness, effectiveness. This is where Deloitte insights becomes super important.
Absolutely critical point. Deloitte rightly points out that as humans, we all carry unconscious biases. And these can significantly skew performance management decisions in ways that are often unfair and, frankly, just illogical. Think about the subtle ways bias might influence, say, the difficulty of goals assigned to different people, or the actual evaluation of their performance, the quality of coaching they get, even opportunities for advancement, and the rewards that get distributed.
And the impact of these biases can be really significant, can't they, on individuals, but also the organization?
Totally. Deloitte's 2019 report had some pretty sobering stats. A big majority of people felt bias negatively impacted their productivity, their engagement, even their overall well-being and confidence. That's a huge cost.
Yeah, a hidden drain on the business.
And what's really revealing is just how pervasive and often unconscious these biases are. Deloitte mentions the impact on pay equity, and it's not just gender. Things like perceived body size, even hair color.
Seriously, hair color?
Unfortunately, yeah. Research suggests these can play a role, and that study with university scientists showing bias in hiring, competency ranking, even pay decisions among women leaders. It's a powerful reminder we all have blind spots.
Wow, it really underscores that we all need to be aware of these pitfalls. And the risk for organizations is huge, too. Deloitte found a large percentage of employees would actually leave for a more inclusive organization.
That's a massive talent drain risk right there.
So how do we proactively address these inherent biases? Deloitte introduces a really helpful framework they call ACT, Awareness, Calibration, and Technology. Let's start with A, awareness.
That's the crucial first step, as Deloitte emphasizes, because these biases often operate below the surface subconsciously. It's essential to help everyone in the organization understand what they are and how they can accidentally influence decisions.
And this isn't just for leaders or HR, it's for everyone.
Exactly. It's relevant for every single person.
And Deloitte offers specific recommendations for different roles.
Yep. For leaders, actively work to understand your own biases, consciously model objective behavior, foster an environment where authenticity and diverse views are valued.
Okay, and HR.
For HR pros, go beyond basic mandatory training. Offer ongoing, deeper workshops on bias. Integrate bias mitigation messages into all relevant training. Make it part of the fabric.
And for team members themselves.
Develop self-awareness. Actively cultivate diverse relationships. Be intentionally curious about different perspectives. And crucially, make a conscious effort to pause and reflect on your own assumptions and judgments.
That pause and reflect piece seems key.
It really is. And that example Deloitte shares the American tech company's bias-busting initiative. Even small steps like renaming conference rooms to honor important women in the field can be a tangible signal and raise awareness practically.
Little things can make a difference. Okay, next in ACT is C, calibration. What exactly does Deloitte mean by this in the context of reducing bias?
Calibration, as Deloitte defines it, is a deliberate, structured process. It's focused on making performance decisions driven by data and evidence, not just gut instinct or potentially biased individual takes.
So more objective, less subjective.
Precisely. It's vital in reviews and ongoing feedback because it pushes for reliance on documented observations, real-time feedback from multiple sources, and credible objective data. The goal is basically to counteract groupthink and individual biases.
Got it. Moving away from opinions towards evidence. And again, Deloitte has tailored recommendations for implementing calibration.
They do. For leaders, actively seek out and carefully interpret relevant data. Make sure goals are calibrated across similar roles for fairness. Consider input from diverse sources. And importantly, pause and reflect on any strong positive or negative feelings towards an employee could be bias creeping in.
That self-check again, and HR's role.
HR needs to enable this shift to data-driven feedback. Act as what Deloitte calls bias disruptors throughout the process. Ensure calibration is actually happening effectively.
Bias disruptors, I like that. And for team members.
Acknowledge and respect diverse working styles. Proactively solicit and provide honest feedback focusing on work behaviors and outcomes, not personality. And actively listen and reflect when receiving feedback.
That feedback focus is key about the work, not the person. I like the example Deloitte highlights too, the 4Cs framework. Contribution, career, connections, capabilities.
Yeah, used by an American multinational tech corp. It's a structured approach for more thoughtful, less biased decisions. It moves beyond just immediate output.
To a broader look at impact and potential.
Exactly. A more holistic view, less susceptible to narrow biases, focused only on easily measured stuff.
Makes sense. Okay, the final element of ACT is T, technology. How can tech help mitigate bias?
Deloitte explains that tech offers the potential to scale these efforts and embed bias detection right into workflows. Performance management software, for example, can identify trends, patterns in feedback language, or promotion decisions that might reveal unconscious biases.
Like flagging potentially biased wording?
Yeah, exactly. They mentioned tools that can flag potentially biased language used for different demographic groups.
Interesting. What else?
The potential of AI and subtle nudges within platforms is interesting too, guiding behavior towards more inclusive practices. Plus, things like organizational network analysis, ONA.
ONA, what's that?
It maps communication and relationship patterns in a company. It can help spot potential bias in who gets information or collaboration opportunities.
Huh. But tech isn't a silver bullet, right?
No, and Deloitte wisely cautions against that. Tech alone isn't enough. The key is strategically optimizing your existing tech to highlight potentially biased patterns and create data summaries that humans can then validate and use for informed decisions.
So tech supports human judgment, doesn't replace it, and recommendations here too.
Yep, leaders, embrace new tech, develop analytical skills to understand the data, leverage tech for in-the-moment nudges like prompts for more objective feedback language.
HR professionals.
Deploy these bias-uncovering technologies. Establish standardized assessment criteria in digital platforms. Consider automated nudges for feedback and behavior modification. And make inclusion data accessible and understandable.
And finally, team members.
Actively use communication platforms for feedback. Diligently document work inputs and accomplishments in these systems. Use any available assessment tools to spot their own potential blind spots.
That example of using analytics to spot gender bias and feedback language personality versus work-based feedback that's powerful really shows how tech can make hidden biases visible.
It really does. Data uncovering hidden patterns to inform more fair practices. Now, let's shift perspective again. Another critical view from Deloitte Insights: why the traditional rank and yank approach is, in their view, fundamentally broken.
Yes, rank and yank. Something many people in larger organizations probably have strong feelings about. Deloitte highlights the damage it does to engagement, how it can alienate high performers, and just the sheer time wasted by managers on forced ranking stress.
The stats are pretty telling, aren't they? Only a tiny fraction of companies find it highly valuable, while most see it as ineffective. Speaks volumes.
It really does. And Deloitte emphasizes this growing shift towards more frequent, ongoing feedback and coaching for continuous development, noting that most organizations were already looking at updating their systems years ago.
Yeah, the trend was clear even then. The core problem with forced ranking, as they point out, is it can create this demoralizing, overly competitive internal climate, breeds animosity, and can even push good people out the door. We saw that with Microsoft abandoning it, remember?
Absolutely. And that long-tail distribution idea is crucial here, especially in knowledge work. Your top performers can massively outperform others.
And a forced curve just squashes their perceived value, while demotivating solid contributors in the middle. It doesn't reflect reality in many jobs.
Exactly. So when over half of executives admit their process doesn't drive engagement or high performance and isn't even a good use of time,
it's clear something fundamental has to change. It's not just desirable, it's necessary. Which brings us to the changing role of managers and that whole idea of decoupling compensation from evaluations.
Right. Deloitte advocates for managers shifting from being primarily judges of the past
to coaches supporting future development. It puts more ownership on employees for their own performance and growth.
And separating feedback from comp talks, that's critical, based on neuroscience, the whole fight or flight thing.
Exactly. When feedback feels directly tied to your paycheck, you naturally get defensive. It shuts down receptiveness to coaching. Deloitte suggests comp should be based on a broader set of factors.
Like skills, market value, customer value, industry benchmarks.
Precisely. A more holistic view. And they highlight companies like Adobe, Juniper, New York Life, Motorola Solutions, Kelly Services, all ditched ratings and reported better engagement and performance.
Adobe's story really brings that to life. Managers spending 80,000 hours a year on soul-crushing evaluations.
Astonishing number, isn't it?
And their shift to quarterly check-ins, driven by peer feedback, focused on improvement and coaching, resulted in a 30% drop in voluntary turnover. That's huge.
It's a powerful testament to the benefits of a more continuous collaborative approach, moving away from high-stakes annual judgment days.
So for organizations wanting to make the shift, where does Deloitte suggest they start?
Several key starting points. First, get senior leaders involved and aligned on the strategy and philosophy. Crucial.
Got to have buy-in from the top.
Absolutely. See performance management as a tool to build skills via flexible conversations, not just bureaucracy. Teach managers how to give better, regular feedback, simplify the process, cut down the forms.
And to link performance scores and comp decisions.
Yes. And finally, coach everyone. Recognize the value of that broad middle. Don't just focus on the extremes.
All sounds very practical, actionable. Okay, finally, Deloitte delves into the performance management puzzle. This tension between wanting consistency for rewards, which keeps old methods alive,
and recognizing those old methods are often lousy at motivating or engaging people today. That WorldatWork study showing most HR leaders grading their process a C or worse really highlights the disconnect.
Totally. Work has changed so much, team-based, project-focused, matrix structures, but performance management often hasn't kept pace.
And Deloitte flags that paradox. Leaders want a big-picture HR view. Employees want a fair assessment of their contribution.
Which leads to this trend of workplace democracy, using social tools for in-the-moment feedback to counter the limits of annual reviews, like the recency effect.
Exactly. Plus generational expectations. Gen Y and younger workers expect real-time digital feedback. It's just normal for them.
Deloitte outlines the drivers for this evolution: performance pressures, changing org structures, networked, flatter teams like that software company using peer reviews.
Tech improvements, social, mobile, cloud, analytics, even gamification, the restaurant leaderboard example, and those generational expectations we mentioned.
The overall shift is significant, isn't it? Hierarchical to networked. Measures to improves, process to outcome, top-down to bottom-up.
Fixed to matrix, weakness to strength-based, directing to coaching, external to internal rewards, annual to just-in-time feedback, autocratic to democratic. It's a major overhaul in thinking.
But Deloitte also stresses the practicalities of bridging the gap. Enthusiasm for new ways is great, but employees still need fairness and balance.
The core needs remain. Clear expectations for behavior and performance, aligning individual work with organizational goals. Peer networks and collaborative tools can offer valuable insights.
Like that online retailer familiarity rating example.
But the manager's role in coaching remains critical. And accessing data from various sources, customer feedback, peer reviews, operational data, like the public hospitals using patient evaluations, gives a much richer picture.
So lessons from leading organizations navigating this.
Don't force social tools if the culture isn't ready. Guard against popularity contests with peer feedback. The manager's context is still vital. A good start is often focusing on recognition and strength-based feedback.
And the survey data confirms this evolution is a big, ongoing global trend.
Absolutely. Relevant now and for the coming years across the Americas, Asia-Pacific, EMEA. It's not a fad.
It really points to a fundamental rethinking, doesn't it? Performance management becoming an ongoing, dynamic process of development, coaching, and shared improvement.
Exactly. Not just an annual chore anymore.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, the key takeaways are pretty clear. It's about thoughtful, aligned targets, lean, focused processes, constructive, empowering dialogue, reviews leading to real action, and proactively mitigating bias through awareness, calibration, and technology.
And the big trend is definitely moving away from outdated rank and yank towards continuous feedback, coaching, development, fairness, and inclusivity.
This deep dive hopefully has given you a roadmap, moving beyond frustrating reviews to build a system that genuinely drives performance, engagement, and fairness.
Absolutely. Providing actionable insights you can actually use in your own context.
So, considering all these insights, here's a final thought. What's one immediate change you could champion in your organization's approach to performance reviews? Something that could make a real positive difference for you and your colleagues. Maybe reflect on that balance between evaluation and development and the power of tackling our own unconscious biases.
A great question to ponder.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thank you for listening to ProcessCast. This episode was brought to you by HEFLO, the BPM platform that empowers businesses to document, automate, and optimize their processes with AI. Experience the intelligence to simplify complex business processes and accelerate your growth with our complete management solution. Visit heflo.com to learn more. Be sure to follow ProcessCast for more insights on business process management, and don't forget to share this episode with your network. Until next time.